You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I am Kirk Mona, and I am joined today by Rachel Ginza and Victoria Thompson. We are all professional naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice? Let's do this.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show this week. I'm excited to be here with Rachel. How you doing,
Yay!
Rachel?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
I am doing well, doing really well. You know, the 4th of July was a little ways back. Did you have a good 4th of July?
I worked on the 4th of July, Kirk.
Amazing. So no.
Yeah.
Well,
I had fun. It was a good time. Little kids running around. It was a good time.
Yeah. I had the day off, and my wife and I rode our bikes down to see the local fireworks display that goes on where I live.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of got there early, set our chairs up, and kind of watched the sunset over the lake. It was really cool. But the ground was a little muddy from all the rain we've had lately.
Oh, it's been
And our collapsible lawn chairs
terrible.
were like slowly sinking into the soil. They didn't continue to sink, but they went a distance and then stopped.
Mm-hmm.
And we were sitting there. We had lots of time to talk, and through kind of a roundabout way in this conversation, as it evolved in the way they do,
Right.
this idea of the soft soil led us to an interesting thought. And I'm going to put it to you in a series of questions, kind of in the way it came up when my wife and I were talking. So,
Okay.
Rachel, do you like crunchy cereal for breakfast?
Ooh. I don't.
Just simple gut, like yes or no. Do you like crunchy cereal?
Yes.
Good. Okay. How do you feel about like a soft breakfast, like eggs or a smoothie?
I do love
That's
a good
okay, right?
smoothie. Yeah, it's
Okay.
fine.
Yeah. That's not gross, right?
Right.
So both of those would be fine options for breakfast, like something like a smoothie that's smooth, it's right there in the name,
Uh-huh.
or something that's crunchy like cereal.
Uh-huh.
So how do you feel about soggy cereal?
I figured you were gonna do this flip-flop about this.
Yeah. What does that do for you?
It's fine. Like I'll eat it. But it's fine.
It's not great, right?
No,
it's like you go,
'cause
oh,
it's
getting
soggy.
kind of soggy.
It's just like falling apart. Maybe that's like
Yeah.
the problem. Like I haven't had it in a long time, but like I used to love like Captain Crunch, even though it would destroy the roof of my mouth.
Oh, the roof of your mouth. Yeah. Yeah.
But like soggy
If it starts to get
never been
soggy,
a thing. Yeah.
Not good, right?
Mm-mm.
So this is the conversation my wife and I were having as we're waiting for the sun to go down and get dark enough for fireworks, is that there's this middle state of things that sometimes is just kind of awful. And yeah, there may be some people out there who are like, I love soggy cereal, but for most people
Right.
it's like when things are it's kind of in between. That's
Well,
like
like
we
I don't
it
like
when
crunchy eggs, for example.
Well, that's gross. But yeah, I wasn't thinking about like things that are not the way you suspect them, but more about like when things are kind of in between. We like things either one extreme or the other, perhaps.
Right.
Like you might like crunchy food or smooth food, but something ambiguously in the middle that's just maybe not quite okay.
Yeah.
So those people who know me well might describe me as a little bit neurospicy. I'm probably not 100% neurotypical. So for me, especially when it comes to food, I do not like ambiguity at all.
That
so
makes
for
a lot
example,
of sense, Kirk. Yes.
I really like mint and I really like chocolate.
But
They're
you
both
don't
great
like mint
flavors.
chocolate.
Good Lord, no. Put them together and I hate the results, okay? Thin Mints, Peppermint Bonbon ice cream are both absolute no-goes for me. Can't stand them, even though I like the ingredients.
How do you like
on
Reese's
their own, right?
Pieces? Reese's Cups.
Reese's Cups are the bomb. I mean, come on.
Okay.
That's a totally separate thing.
That's fair.
But likewise, a new example came up in conversation at work just last week, and it was BLT pizza. Now, there's a local place that makes it, and my friend insisted I try it. That's you, Brett. I'm talking about you.
It's you.
And look, here's the thing. It's fine.
Right.
It works. And here's the key
I don't
thing.
like the idea of like crunchy, like raw lettuce. Was it raw lettuce?
Yeah, oh yeah, it's raw lettuce on top.
I
like,
don't
after
love
you
that
cook it.
on a pizza. I feel like that
Well,
feels wrong.
it works, it's fine, but here's the thing, combining the two does not make the end result better.
Right.
Like I would rather just have a standard pizza that's really good or have a BLT that's really good, and you put them together and make a BLT pizza. It's like, I'd rather be having either one of these things, but not the thing in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
This middle ground just does not appeal to me. And so it got me thinking, as we're having this conversation, about ambiguity. And clearly some of us are much more comfortable with ambiguity than others. And I've discovered that generally, I'm not a fan. I don't like certain things that I like certain things that I don't like when they're combined because it becomes ambiguous. Another example, I love root beer. I love ice cream. Root beer floats, however, not that good. All right. Like I've had them. They're fine. But to me, they lessen what makes each distinct thing good.
Okay.
So it got me thinking about this. And I wondered if psychologists have a name or a term for humans or really all animals' innate dislike of the ambiguous.
Okay.
And sure enough, they do. It's called simply enough ambiguity aversion. And I stumbled upon, it was like, for once, something's named something really sort of logical. I stumbled upon a really great summation on a website called neuristics.com, which is a website all about heuristics, which help us understand, concepts.
Okay.
And I'm just going to read for you what it says, just word for word, because I think it sums it up really well. It says, ambiguity aversion refers to the preference of humans for options with fewer unknowns and avoiding options with missing information. People tend to avoid unknown situations, having a preference for what they do know. Although many of us like to take risks, people hate uncertainty. So we tend to stay away from anything that we don't know or don't understand much about. Ambiguity aversion is also the tendency to avoid possible options where unknown information about that option makes the chances uncertain or unknown. Although people make attempts to get more information about these situations or these unknown options, when getting that information is impossible, ambiguity aversion occurs. Now, I think that's interesting, but it frames it in terms of like risk taking. And I think there's really two issues going on that I think is really interesting. That's why I'm talking about it. One is how willing or interested or open is a person to taking a chance on something ambiguous. But the second part, and I didn't really find any research specifically on this, but the second part to me is about the enjoyment or dislike of the experience of ambiguity once a decision has already been made. Like I'm willing to try BLT pizza. It's pretty low risk.
Right.
You know what I mean? But once you have made that choice and you are dealing with the consequences of an ambiguous, situation or an ambiguous experience, what does that do for you? And how much enjoyment does a person receive, or how comfortable they are while experiencing the in-between or the ambiguous, I think is a really sort of fascinating question. And as my wife and I were sitting there talking, we were coming up with more and more examples where it's like, like a lot of times that people like things either one way or the other, and that middle ground is sort of like, like we're just not, it doesn't sit comfortably with us,
Yeah. I've met you both. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And as I started to think about this, I'm like, well, this applies to food, but also to our experiences of spaces. And there's certainly been research on transitional spaces, what are sometimes called liminal spaces.
I was about to be like, you mean liminal spaces?
I do indeed.
Like a gas station at 2:30 in the morning?
I mean, yeah, but that's like the temporariness of it. But I'm thinking like things like doorways, entryways, waiting rooms, hallways, these sort of temporary spaces that were not meant to inhabit for a long time. Some of these are the same sort of spaces people describe as uncomfortable or creepy or even haunted. Like we just don't really like to be in these spaces. So, okay, where does this all come from? Right? Like if this is a thing that is fairly common in humans, and I would assume in a lot of other animals as well, like why? And while risk-taking, especially safe risk-taking, such as going on a roller coaster, has a certain appeal to some of us, especially me, I love roller coasters.
They're so much fun.
In general, humans seem to have a built-in aversion to ambiguity, which is very important to note, is a very distinct thing from risk taking.
Mm-hmm.
So this is likely a deep-seated evolutionary trait that is linked to survival. While an ambiguous pizza isn't a matter of life or death, ambiguity in the wild has, for billions of years of evolution, from everything from, bacteria to humans, ambiguity is linked to bad outcomes. Quick decision-making is critical to survival. So a dichotomy of black and white, good and bad, edible and poisonous, safe or dangerous, is very important and efficient. Should I walk on the well-lit path or the dark one where I can't see what's going to happen? That's a quick, easy decision, right?
I immediately went, well lit.
Right. Should I eat the fruit that tastes sweet or the one that tastes so bitter I have to spit it out? Okay. Again, easy, right? But ambiguity stops us in our tracks. It makes us stop to assess a situation that lacks enough information to be quickly assessed. There may not be a clear best decision, and our brains innately don't like that because it's a risk to our safety and survival. It's kind of like that, well, there's this path that's sort of half lit and half in shade, or half in darkness, and you're kind of like, it's maybe, I don't know, maybe. Like it's not a quick, easy decision for us. And so I think the ambiguous just sort of naturally makes us feel uncomfortable. And what I think is interesting about this is actually a frame that we can use to think about why certain topics on this very show are strange.
Ooh.
So why is a flying fish strange and a puppy isn't? They're both just animals, right? But the flying fish inhabits an ambiguous space between fish and, I don't want to say bird, but fish and flying thing, right?
Right.
It's to some degree ambiguous, and that gives us pause. And I think there's so many topics that we hit on the show that kind of highlight spaces where nature becomes ambiguous. One of our favorite phrases we use is nature abhors our little boxes. And boy, do we like to find those test cases that like really push the limits of those comfortable, non-ambiguous things that we think we know about nature. I always laugh when I describe something strange on the show, and then Rachel, your first response is to say, "Oh, I hate that."
Oh yeah.
I mean, you're literally the host of a show about strange things, and yet you show your love for the topic by saying how much you hate it.
Absolutely. I'm like, I love this.
That's
but
clearly
I
a great
hate this.
example. Yeah. I look at it as your way of stating how uncomfortable it makes you. And that's often because the creature or the concept or whatever is being mentioned is hard to fit into a comfortable box. And so it sits in this ambiguous middle ground, or just sits so far outside of any ground that we aren't even sure where to put it at all. Those are often really fun ones to do too.
Oh yeah.
There is, I say that's really another form of ambiguity. Things can be so ambiguous that we aren't sure of what to make of them at all. And this makes us uncomfortable. But you know what? Sometimes it's important to be uncomfortable. Like part of my background before I was a naturalist, I used to teach experiential education, which is all about helping people leave their comfort zone.
Oh yeah.
And one of the things we used to teach about is that when you stretch into the ambiguous, as long as we're still safe, that's when we grow as people. We try new foods, we learn about new people and cultures, we expand our mind as to what's possible in this amazing and strange universe. So I hope this show that we do helps all of you embrace the ambiguous in a safe way, so you can, leave the show more than what you arrived here as.
That's really
and
lovely,
that
Kirk.
is what I have for you this week.
Huh.
Deep thoughts from a 4th of July conversation.
Yeah.
This is literally what a conversation with my wife and I sounds like as we're sitting in the park.
I'm not even surprised. That completely tracks.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll find out what Rachel has for us this week. And is it ambiguous?
Probably.
We'll find out.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Now, Kirk, I'm going to tell you a little story.
Yes, love stories.
Now, in 2014, on the island of Wenanua, I might be butchering it. It's one of the small islands in New Zealand.
Okay.
There were 5 eggs laid by a very special bird, or by several special birds.
Okay.
Now, these birds are highly, highly endangered, to the point where we pay attention to how many fertile eggs there are. So
right. Down to the individual. We know them all.
We do. And I mean, there are other eggs laid in this season, but only 5 ended up being viable and fertile.
Okay, wow.
So
that's not many.
Pay attention. There are conservation teams dedicated to the survival of this species. And in 2014, one of the mothers accidentally sat a little too hard and slightly crushed the egg.
Okay.
So researchers and conservationists then took the egg. It wasn't like completely crushed. It was just like a divot of sorts. They mended it as best as they could with glue and tape. And then
glue and tape?
Glue and tape.
Oh my gosh.
There are pictures,
okay.
Kirk. There are pictures.
Yeah, no, I can imagine.
And then they proceeded to actually incubate this egg until the bird and eventually the bird hatched.
Amazing.
Right?
Yes, that is super amazing.
It's so good. And this bird, he ended up growing up just fine, despite the fact that he was sat on a little too hard when he was still in his egg. And this species of bird is so special that they don't give them names until they reach 150 days old. Okay. And so at that point in time, they get their own name. Until then, before then, they are known only within their with their birth number and the order of birth order. So this particular bird was known as Lisa 1, and now he is known as Rapuka. Raupuke. Puke?
Oh, okay.
One of the two. And he
one of those two. All right.
Is one of the 247 Kākāpō birds of New Zealand.
Cool.
Yeah. So let's go into this a little bit more. Now these...
Please do.
I don't know. Have you heard of this bird, Kirk?
It sounds... It's ringing a bell. Tell me more about... Yeah.
So...
How do you spell it?
Kākāpō.
Okay, I just looked up a picture, and yes, I've definitely heard of these before.
Yes, you have. So this is the heaviest parrot in the world. It is very large. It's very rotund. It has these large, scaly feet with zygodactyl toes.
You better explain what that means.
Yes, I will. Zygodactyl means that there's 2 in front and 2 in back. So that way they're able to grip onto the branch. Think of like chameleon toes is very similar.
So we see it in owls and woodpeckers a lot.
We also see it in osprey.
There you go.
Yeah. So these birds are large. They're the heaviest species of parrot that are still around, and they are a flightless bird. So they're actually really good at climbing, which is why their feet, the zygodactylness of their talons are really helpful, because they don't just climb a little bit. They can get to the tops of trees, which is wild to me. That would be for me at least, that just reminds me of when I first saw a turkey 30 feet up in a tree.
Right. Yeah.
I think I nearly had a heart attack. Because we just heard it start to flap its wings and then fly off, but we didn't know it was up there, and so we thought something else was happening. We didn't know what was going on. It was. You
don't expect a turkey to be in a tree.
No, you don't, and not a full-grown turkey.
Now these are not as big as a turkey.
No, these are not as big as a turkey. So at most, they get to be 6 pounds, a little over 6 pounds.
Around 6 pounds.
Okay. Yeah. For the most part, they're an average of males are 4.5 pounds and females are 3.5 on average. But that's the most that it can weigh is 6. They, because they're weightless, or not weightless, my goodness, they're flightless, not weightless.
Flightless, That would be something.
Especially for the world's heaviest parrot.
You have brought in quite a story this week, Rachel. The weightless bird.
Woo!
Especially since you just literally said how much they weigh.
I know.
Very confusing.
So, males are heavier than females, and
sure.
Because they are flightless birds, they actually are really good at maintaining fat reserves on their body.
Interesting.
So they can actually have a good amount of fat stored on their body. They don't have a keel, but they do use like their wings for balance and to help break their fall and everything.
So I was like, first I'm like, why would they not have a keel? Which those you don't know is like a sort of like your sternum on a human, but it has a fin that sticks up.
Mm-hmm.
But the whole point is that that's where your flight muscles attach. And if you're not a flightless bird,
then you
probably
need a
don't
keel.
have much of a need for a keel.
Yeah.
Because you don't need strong breast muscles.
Exactly.
Fascinating. Okay.
Yeah. So this is a parrot. It actually is really cool. It's like this mossy yellow-green feathered bird. I realized that I never described what it looked like. When Europeans first saw this bird, they thought it looked a lot like an owl. It has a very owlish like face with like a facial disc around its eyes, which makes sense because it is a nocturnal species.
Oh, so it is relying on hearing.
It is relying on smell.
On smell. Okay, but not hearing. They don't think, even with that sort of facial disc look.
Not.
Or you not that you saw?
Not that I saw. Like, they rely a little bit on, like, they don't have really good eyesight in the first place, and they have a really well-developed sense of smell, but it doesn't look like that they have much when it comes to, like, they don't necessarily rely on hearing more than others. It seems to be more of a smell.
And they're also, one thing you didn't mention, I was looking at the pictures, they're rather rotund.
Oh, they are so round. It is so
they're like
great.
A rugby ball covered in moss.
It's
sitting on a branch.
Amazing. I love it.
I did see one of the other names they have down there is moss chicken.
Mm-hmm. Also known as owl parrot was one. They also apparently...
moss chicken. I love it.
Moss chicken is so good. So moss chickens apparently have like this distinct smell to them, which is bad for the predators that were reintroduced. At one point in time, this particular bird actually got down to 47 individuals.
Oof.
So
wow, that's not good.
No, the genetic diversity in this species of bird is real bad, Kirk. It's real bad. They're trying.
I wonder if that accounts for why a lot of the eggs just aren't viable at this point.
That's what they're thinking, because it's like
okay,
about half of the eggs they struggle a lot with infertility in these birds, and they are struggling a lot with whether like half the eggs aren't fertile or won't hatch, which is really, really rough because one, it's a beautiful little bird, big bird, but I'm sorry, it's 49 birds, not 47.
Oh, it got down to 49. Okay.
Mm-hmm. But because of that, like the fact that there aren't enough that are coming out of the eggs, aren't able to hatch, that's like a really, really big problem. And it brings up that whole idea and debate of when is it time to let a species go? When is it our fault? How can we help? When are we just elongating? It's just that weird debate of how much effort does a species need? Now, me personally,
it's almost, Rachel, like we find ourselves in a slightly ambiguous situation.
Oh my gosh, you're right. We want there to be an answer. That was a quick callback. But there isn't.
Yep.
Now, I say all this with the knowledge and with the idea and want that I want this bird to still stay around. I do think that it's worth saving. We've already gone such a wide distance between where it was at 49 to 247. So that's really amazing on its own.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And these are cool little birds. Well, little birds. They're like...
You keep saying little. They're not that little.
They're not little. They're like... They're almost 3... Their wingspan is like almost 3 feet, and they can measure up to a little about 2 feet in height. So they're not little.
Yeah. Do you know like, how long they live?
Ooh, great question.
Like, okay.
So they're still, when you have such a small population, it can be really difficult to discern that. There's a variety of accounts, but there is research there's a reported lifespan of up to about 100 years, which is...
Wait, hold on. 100 years?
Yeah.
For a bird?
For a bird.
That is nuts. I mean, for reference, so people know, like, I mean, what my point of reference is when we're doing bird banding, a lot of birds smaller birds don't live past a couple of years.
Right.
You know, most of the little birds you're a bird feeder, most of them die in the first year. The ones that are left, it's like 3 to 5 years, right? And the 5-year-olds are pretty old. They can get older. Some of the songbirds can get up to 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. But most of them are really young. And then when you get into bigger birds, more like the size of this, I think about some of the captive raptors I've worked with. Like we just sadly had to say goodbye to our barred owl that I worked with. But she was I think 27 years old. Yeah. Which is like
that's
crazy
bonkers.
old.
Yeah.
Super, super old. I currently work with a red-tailed hawk, and, you know, he'll probably go to about maybe 30 years old if he, you know, his health holds out really well. And that's really old. But then to have a parrot going 100 years?
That's what they're thinking. There's still a lot of research to be had for it.
Yeah.
But it's hard.
I want to know
because
where they got that number from.
It's hard. So I'm actually looking at that paper. I'm looking at the paper that another site was referencing. And it's a parrot apart, the natural history of the Kākāpō in the context for conservation management. And that was by Ralph Polisland, Don Merton, and John Cockrum. And this was published in 2006. So there's still...
Wow.
Like, that was 2006, you know? So it goes
And I'm
through...
assuming this is birds in captivity, because like birds in captivity usually live much, much, much longer because they're getting such... You know, they're getting regular meals and healthcare and all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah. Well, this is when you remember that all of these birds are watched, like, significantly. Like, there's a lot of conservation effort behind these birds.
That helps them live a long time.
And they are still wild birds. So they are all, like, banded and kept track of.
Okay, so these aren't, like, all in, say, like, a sanctuary, like a zoo or something. These are... actually maintaining a wild population?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, I did not realize that. That's even more impressive then.
Yeah. So they're trying to maintain like you said, they're trying to maintain a wild population. Wow. Which so
if
rough.
They live, I mean, that's really good news though, because if they can live that long, that means each pair of birds has many, 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 many chances, assuming, I don't know if there's a certain age at which they're no longer producing offspring. We've talked about the albatross Wisdom, who is quite old and is still producing viable young. So if it's a similar situation, you know, if you're living to be, you know, between like 60 to potentially 100 years old, like that is a lot of chances to have offspring, even if they're not all successful. So that like if they only lived like 15 years at the max, you kind of go, oof, boy.
Yeah, no, these
I don't
are
have a lot
like
of hope for the situation.
These get to be pretty old from what they've been what at least this paper was talking about. Like there's been some birds that are absolutely more than 40 years old. And the ages of 42 of probably at that point in time, there was maybe like 200 birds. 42 of those, at that point in time, it was almost half of the percent of the birds actually on the island all of the birds, I should say, not the one island, scattered over 4 islands. 42 of the birds' ages were known because of conservation efforts. So they were able to keep track of that. So, I mean...
Well, I did look this up. I looked up macaws, these beautiful, like, rainbow macaws, like people are familiar with, because it's the first parrot that comes to mind, basically. But, in the wild, about 30 to 50 years old, but some have been known to live up to 65 years in captivity, it says. And then it says, I'm seeing a link here that says, the oldest pet macaw on record lived to be 112, which is astounding. But I did not know that group of birds lived that long. That is amazing.
Yeah, parrots are really, really long lived. I actually didn't think it was that like big of a deal when I read that it was like maybe around 100 years, because I know that parrots, like great African gray parrots, can easily live to 80, 90 years old.
Well, outlive their, their owners. The scarlet macaw. Way to go, scarlet macaw. You are an amazing bird too.
Yeah.
Very cool.
We'll probably talk about that. So that is what I have for you all today, is the Kākāpō. Kākāpō, probably not the Kākāpō. Kākāpō. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say my sources were Wikipedia, the article that I already talked about, as well as the Department of Conservation website for New Zealand, actually.
Way to go, New Zealand. 5% of our listeners are from down there in New Zealand. So hello to all of our New Zealand listeners.
Hello. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Thanks for joining me this week, Kirk.
Yeah, well, I'll say especially thanks because, here in North America, it's summer right now. And shocker, but podcast listening numbers across the board take a hit in the summertime in the Northern Hemisphere. So if you are listening, even now during the summer months, thank you. That means you are some of the hardcore fans of the show who listen even when the weather's out. I listen to podcasts, like outside and stuff in the summertime too. So we appreciate you guys a lot for sticking around even when it's not the cold depths of winter. And I do see, just looking at our stats, right now Australia is kind of trouncing Canada in terms of numbers because it's winter down there right now, right? So like they're like, yeah, let's sit inside and listen to podcasts, I guess. So we appreciate everyone in the world who listens, even if it's not apparently podcast listening season where you're all appreciated. And we got some fun stuff for next week, so we'll see you then.
See you then.
Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all of our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach out to us on social media by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can also check out our website, which is strangebynaturepodcast.com. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.